Hello everyone and welcome to my second video on this channel. This video is dedicated to a predicted lineup on Tottenham Hotspur's clash against Fulham today. So we'll be looking at two alternatives that Tudor will have in mind with the dilemma that he faces. But before we dive into that, I want to quickly touch upon his comments that he made during the week about the players' mentality, but mainly their physicality and his sort of criticism on this issue and the way that he's ready to rule. So let's dive into the comments that he did make. Igor Tudor, that they came out on the Friday, so it was yesterday that they came out. So first of all, I want to start by mentioning that he hasn't really been happy with the level of fitness that the club players have at the minute. Of course, he's aware that there are 11 injured players currently. However, with the players available, he believes that they are not fit enough, which is the reason why during the week he's been doing bleep tests with them. And he did mention during his press conference that he was explaining his style of play, that when you are pressing high, you need everyone to be on the same fitness level, because if there is just one player that is, slightly behind, the whole press, the whole system, clashes and breaks down. So very interesting comments. So he was clearly hinting that there may be a few players that are fit, but overall we're really struggling. So he's mentioned, I put some runs without the ball. Never players like runs without the ball, so we put some runs without balls, into the sessions. But it's a moment when there is no time to think too much about what somebody doesn't like. And the best thing is that they understand this. So they gave me their availability to do these things. And he later went on to mention a few interesting quotes about saying that the young players can't cry. So he was clearly hinting on some fragility maybe within the camp of Tottenham Hotspur. So those were some interesting comments. But now moving on to the more important things that I wanted to cover today. So this is not a long video like the first one was. Predicted lineup. Now, as we all are aware, Igor Tudor loves to play that three at the back system, mainly 5-3-2 or 5-2-3. In this Tottenham case, in this scenario of the job that he's taken on, he'll definitely be playing 5-3-2, because you've got two players up top that cannot be dropped, and they're both primary positions are strikers. So 5-3-2 is something we will be seeing until the end of the season, in my opinion, because you cannot simply drop Solanke or Kolo Muani. They are two key players, and you look at a relegation scrap, and you have to be focusing on two main things. The first one is, how do you not let goals in? And the second and most important one is, where do you get your goals from? And so the fact that Kolo Muani and Igor Tudor clearly have a link, they have a relationship. We saw that with Kolo Muani's positive performance against Arsenal on the weekend, where he got his first Premier League goal, and he was probably or arguably one of the best Tottenham players on the field, which we haven't said about Kolo Muani throughout the whole season. So I believe that Kolo Muani will be the quickest to adapt to this Tudor system. And then on the other hand, you've got a player in Dominic Solanke who has faced a very tough individual season due to injuries, etc. However, he is undroppable. He is one of Tottenham's almost record signing with, a 60 million fee on his name, and he brings that to the table. His aggressive pressing. Is he a finisher? Well, he was at Bournemouth. He hasn't really shown it at Tottenham at the minute, but you cannot simply drop Dominic Solanke. So here, what you see is the players that definitely cannot be dropped for the upcoming fixture against Fulham, and I will explain that in a second, so we'll go one by one. So in goal, we've got Vicario because, well, first of all, Kinski has played 2 games this season, and as much as we would love to see a change in goal, that cannot simply happen in any near future. Maybe in the Champions League you can give Kinski a run. Maybe we'll see what position we will be in going into that Atletico Madrid trip. But for now, Vicario is obviously number one choice. In defence, I've only picked 2 options. Jed Spence, either left wing back, which I hate to see him there, or right wing back, depending on the availability of Pedro Porro. That is a question mark because do you play Souza at left wing back? Souza that has played around 30 minutes in the Premier League so far. Now moving on, I picked Mickey van der Ven, obviously captain until Christian Romero comes back, undroppable, even though his performances have been droppable. The others I've left blank. Let's start on the right wing back position. Ideally, that would be Pedro Porro. We don't know, is he available from minute one? We have no clue if that's the case. Right centre back, empty again. Ideally, Kevin Danso. Do we know he's ready to start from minute one? No, we don't. We have to consider that both the two players I've just mentioned have missed 1.5 months of football. So it's very difficult to launch them back in and risk any complications during the first game. And the middle one, the only fit, right, in in quotation marks fit, Radu Dragushin, who has just played 4 games since returning from an ACL injury, and secondly, his on the ball panic, attics where you cannot trust him. Whenever Radu Dragushin gets the ball, there is a feeling of anxiety among Spurs fans and I believe among his Spurs teammates. So there is a massive risk with playing Radu Dragushin there. Do you drop him? Do you risk, absolutely annihilating his confidence in a time where you need everyone's confidence to be going up, not down? So potentially I could have left Radu Dragushin there. However, he is a massive question mark when he does perform because even looking at that North London derby, first half, best player on the field. Second half, you could argue he was one of the worst Tottenham players on that field. So, it's very hit and miss at the moment with Radu Dragushin. Now, moving up in the midfield positions, you might be surprised I've left one or two players out. I will explain that in a second. I've put Palhinha in there. However, we could very likely see him start at right centre-back today. He's facing his former club, a club that gave him the podium to start growing his career in the attributes that he absolutely excels in. And these attributes are most useful when he plays as a number 6, not as a right centre back. That is not his natural position in any way, shape, or form. So I would love to see Palhinha start in that midfield ahead of the back five and try and break up the play and try and start the counter attacks as high up the pitch as possible. I've put Xavi Simons in there, and some of you might disagree. However, Xavi Simons right now, with the fact that we are looking for someone who has progressive passing, on paper, Xavi Simons at the minute for Tottenham doesn't have that, but overall, it's his ability on the ball that definitely puts him in the equation. So I've left that right central midfield role empty because Conor Gallagher has not impressed. And if you take away that price tag, if you take away his nationality, there is a huge question mark upon his performances so far. It's an absolute shadow of what we saw at Chelsea, Crystal Palace, and it's an absolute shadow of what we saw in his positive or good games for Atletico Madrid, and some of them being not so long ago, 2 months ago. So what's happened there? Is he not motivated? Is he, is there a lack of cohesion with his teammates? And then you look at Pape Matar Sarr, who I thought had a good game against Arsenal. I really did, especially in the first 20 minutes. Then he sort of faded out, which is the reason why I think saying he had a good game is sort of stretching. But Pape Sarr gives you that energy in midfield that we definitely need right now. And then you've got the final option in Yves Bissouma or Archie Gray. Archie Gray is a great progressive passer. However, there is a high chance we might see him start at right back today. So very, very tough choices for Igor Tudor to make because Archie Gray does give you some composure on the ball. He's probably one of the players that you can trust to pass a football. Yves Bissouma you can trust being calm on the ball, but we saw his lack of energy trying to, react when Radu Dragushin passed that ball into Eze's path when Arsenal went to score their third goal and Bissouma was just sort of tracking back, not at the pace you would like to see. So that's the reason I've picked these as definite starters. So let's get into the two choices Igor Tudor faces. And number one is a surprise. I've picked the back four for this game, because Igor Tudor has hinted a few things. He's hinted at trying to get the most out of the players available. If he deems Danso and Porro unfit, he will have to be forced into considering a back four, making sure Palhinha is able to play in his natural position. Archie Gray, more comfortable as right back than right wing back. So I have chosen this diamond shape that will sort of focus on still the wing backs, the full backs trying to cover the wing space, moving the ball forward. And that is again a problem, because you look at the wing backs the fullbacks in Jed Spence and Archie Gray, and they don't convince you that they are able to move the ball forward positively. So again, a massive question mark laying there. However, that could work, because you look at that midfield four, and you've got three players who are, again, in quotation marks, fighters. And then you've got one player who is comfortable on the ball, and you want to use him in that final third to find the players in Kolo Muani and Solanke. However, we do know that Igor Tudor does prefer playing through the wide areas as well as through the middle, but more importantly through the wide areas. So that could be an issue. On the other hand, I've gone with what I believe is a much more likely formation for this trip to Craven Cottage, and that is a back three. I've gone much more positive. This is something most Tottenham fans would love to see, because it does work as a sort of 3-4-1-2, not completely 3-5-2. The reason I mentioned 3-4-1-2 is because you will have the Xavi Simons moving in that number 10 role, which we want to see him in. So I've gone for, of course, as I mentioned, the starters, definitely, Vicario in goal, and a back three of Kevin Danso, Radu Dragusin, Mickey van der Ven. They're all natural centre-backs. Radu Dragusin has had the most experience from these three centre-backs in a back three, so he can use that to his advantage. He will have Kevin Danso next to him, who is a natural centre-back, so could that elevate his performance as well? We must remember that Radu Dragusin has only won 4 Premier League games since his time at Tottenham in, if I'm not wrong, 21 tries as a starting, in the starting lineup. However, he has played centre back for the majority of those games with Archie Gray. So being surrounded by Mickey van der Ven on your left and Kevin Danso on your right, of course, boosts the chances of winning a football game when you're just playing with Archie Gray as your centre back. An absolutely tired Pedro Porro, an exhausted Pedro Porro, and a Jed Spencer left back. So definitely this enhances the chances of winning the game. So a lot of criticism coming Dragusin's way, and rightly so. However, I think this is the strongest defensive lineup that we can go for. Ahead of them, I've gone for wing back that is a natural wing back. He came from Sporting Lisbon as one of the best wing backs in the European competitions, and even in the Champions League. So Pedro Porro would be fantastic. He's our most progressive passer. It would elevate our performance from the North London derby extremely to that next level that we desperately need. In the middle, I've gone for Conor Gallagher, who hasn't caught my eye. I've already mentioned it in this video. His lack of doing the basics of passing. He's just running around like a headless chicken, and it's not what you want to see, is it? So he needs to step his game up. He's been brought in as a leader, as a ready-made player. He should be fighting for that spot at the World Cup, and we haven't seen none of that happen. Then we've got João Palhinha in as a 6 ahead of that back three to break up play as high as possible. This is what Igor Tudor loves. He loves turnovers as high as possible and starting the attacks already. We never saw that against our North London rivals. However, there is a high chance with Fulham's very aggressive and high stance and play. It's a massive opportunity to get at them, and who knows the club better than João Palhinha? So I believe he should be starting in midfield today. Then, as I've already touched upon it, Xavi Simons, you see him here as a left central midfielder, sort of as a number 8. No, I'd obviously use him as the number 10 just behind Solanke and Kolo Muani, picking out pockets between that Spence Solanke link, or picking out pockets between that Kolo Muani Porro link. and he needs to be putting more crosses in to feed our two forwards that will definitely be starting today. Solanke, hopefully he hasn't got a sore throat anymore. Hopefully Igor Tudor has gone to the nearest pharmacy and bought him some Strepsils, because the decision to not start him against North London in the North London derby is absolutely baffling in my opinion. And of course, who knows Igor Tudor better than Kolo Muani? It will be interesting, very, very interesting to see if Igor Tudor has used this break of 6 days for training to lift the fitness performance of the team, not just the psychological performance. Very, very excited for today's game. Could that be quickly crushed? Maybe. I've also not touched upon Souza, maybe very briefly in this video, but I do want to mention him. It is absolutely embarrassing from our hierarchy, from the board in Vinay Venkatesham and Johan Lang, to buy a 19-year-old Souza who is clearly not quite ready for the next step, and not bringing a senior left back. Yes, they tried for Andy Robertson, didn't go through. There should have been some backup option ready for him, because with the injury of Ben Davies against West Ham, we have struggled to replace a natural left-footed, wing back in that position. And it would have been Ben Davies most likely starting at that left-hand side, even in North London derby. We would have seen Jed Spence starting a right wing back where he's more comfortable in, because it feels like he has this sort of magnet whenever he's playing on the left that just sort of gravitates him into the middle of the field. So very interesting to see the mentality of the team today. Could go any sort of direction. We could be 1-0 down early on, like we was in the home fixture, 2-0 down in the 6th minute. How do our players react to such a situation? We need to be on top of our game. And with West Ham dropping points, with Nottingham Forest playing at the same time as us, it's an ideal situation to go 7 points clear. And going 7 points clear from the relegation zone would mean that we can actually sort of enjoy that Champions League run, whether that ends at home against Atletico Madrid, whether we go further. It would definitely hinder the Champions League run if we are not able to win today, because the pressure will again be back on the relegation battle. And ultimately, if we lose today, it just sort of cancels out, because West Ham lost, we lose, and it will still be 4 points. We don't want to be in that situation. You win, you get 3 points, 7 points off of relegation zone. That's amazing news. And just 5 points off the top 10. And if I'm not wrong, it's 13 points from European spots, which we'll definitely not be reaching. However, it does put that into perspective, that sort of releasing of stress, and it allows our players to play with more comfort, and we could see an improved performance in the Champions League. So there you go. There's my predicted lineup. I'll put it on screen one more time before I finish this video. Sorry, that is definitely not it. And thank you for watching. I will be here tomorrow putting out another video. So any like, any subscribe will be much appreciated. I'm sure every one of you will be tuning in. We'll see how close I was to catching the lineup. Anyway, let's enjoy the game today. Thank you for watching, and come on you Spurs.